Hi! Hi, everybody! Here's some Joe Biden, apparently. Yes, as 20 Democrats showed up to be like, the old ways aren't the way forward, and hey, your politics specifically did racism to me specifically, the Democratic Party seems to have coalesced around the toothy, poke-you-in-the-chest centrist who, to his credit, knows my favorite historical quote. All men and women created by the go, you know the thing. Do we have a staged reading of that historical quote?
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by the go, you know the thing.
Jeezers, guys. Bejeezers to Betsy and a hearty mother That is like, and what about, oh, okay, well, I mean, we could have had Delaney. You know, where are my Delaney bros at, huh? Yeah? Any Delaney ladies in the house? Yeah? Okay, well, I guess this is what we're working with. Super Tuesday has resulted in a Biden lead, with Bernie Sanders very close behind. So it's pretty darn clear that the narrative going forward will be whether a moderate or a progressive has a better chance of taking on Donald Trump, which I'm sure will result in a very calm and reasonable primary that won't make everyone want to jump into all of the volcanoes. Seriously, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. This one, I'm not like mixing him up with any, okay. The guy who has told multiple Democratic voters to their face not to vote for him on camera.
You should vote for Trump. You should vote for Trump. No, I'm not gonna do that.
That's the guy, right? The guy we're looking to take on Trump. The you should vote for Trump guy. With all the touching and the not great record with women's rights and the Hyde Amendment stuff, and having once said, quote, I don't think that a woman has the sole right to say what should happen to her body, the Iraq war vote, the perceived deep state scandal around Ukraine that is definitely going to clog up the general election. That's the guy you think Trump will struggle to defeat. Well, you know, now that I think about it, it's true that Trump did say that Biden would be the harder candidate to go against, like in a secret audio clip. Do we have that audio clip?
Had she picked Bernie Sanders, it would have been tougher. Was the only one I didn't want her to pick.
Ah! Sorry, that wasn't Biden he was talking about. It was some other guy. The other guy. With the Medicare for All and all the youth and bird support, who is going against Biden in the primary, where we are choosing who should go up against Donald Trump. But okay, all right, this video can't just be me running my luscious mouth about all the ways I think Bernie is better than Joe Biden. Somewhere in my brain, I suppose I realize that. Nor will I just ramble on about how pulling a far-right populist movement further to the center is not best accomplished by the left-leaning party moving to the center, because I already did that, actually. Nor can I try to make the completely hopeful case as to why Bernie still has a big chance at getting the nomination. Because the honest truth is that it is going to be hard. A hardcore progressive victory within the Democratic Party, as it always is, will be tough in the coming months. Something that perhaps shouldn't be seen as a shocker if you happen to look at any polls about how Democrats skew, which, if you're wondering, is mainly conservative or moderate leaning. For progressives, it's an uphill battle to the top of a volcano, which I may or may not jump inside. Joe versus the volcano! Perfect reference. And yes, before we get started, it's true that despite his record and him cozying up to Republicans, past, present, and future, Biden is actually more progressive than people give him credit for. Partly because the Democratic Party is more progressive than they were 12 years ago, so by default. But the American Conservative Union gave him a measly 12.6 rating for how often his votes align with them. But by that same metric, he's still less of a progressive than Obama was, or of course, Senator Sanders. He's pushing as the moderate option of the race, is the point. Because bottom line, Jack, moderate Democrats are more popular in their party. But other, more depressing bottom line, and this is kind of a big deal and the subject of this video and something that perhaps we all need to worry about, moderate Democrats don't win presidential elections. So, I didn't know I needed to say this, but it looks like I have to say it, so here I am saying it. If your primary goal is to get Donald Trump out of office in 2020, we shouldn't just do the same thing we did in 2016 and hope it'll work out this time. Joe Biden is running as a moderate and mainstream alternative to Bernie Sanders. The exact same thing Hillary did in 2016. And when she got the nomination, Clinton went on to lose 4.4 million votes from people who voted for Obama in 2012. Now, Obama, you might remember from the phrase, Barack Obama's Vice President Joe Biden. And hey, speaking of Obama, you might not remember because it's been at least 50 years since 2008, but it was also Hillary Clinton who ran as a more moderate alternative to Barack Obama during his primary. Obama was frequently criticized for his then progressive views that were seen as risky for the general election. But ultimately, Obama got the nomination and took on John McCain and sneak peek of Donald Trump, Sarah Palin, while running on a platform of change and universal health care, and yes, we can, and mustard for everybody. Sop it up and drink that f***ing mustard, you sick animals, you love it. But then what happened? Oh, Obama won. He became a president, all while running as the more progressive choice with a bold strategy. And we can talk all day about whether or not he actually lived up to that campaign. Like, I still haven't gotten my mustard. Where's my mustard, Obama? But the point is that by just looking at the last two major elections, it's like super clear that a moderate approach wasn't the answer. The Atlantic went a step further and looked at all of the campaigns since the 70s, finding that moderate Democrats have a losing record that no one seems to talk about. They lost in 1980, 2000, 2004, and 2016. A political economist named Thomas Piketty also looked into this for the past 70 years, not just in the US, but the UK and France, and found the same conclusion. To quote his paper on the subject, without a strong egalitarian and internationalist platform, it is difficult to unite low-education, low-income voters from all origins within the same coalition and to deliver a reduction in inequality. In other words, in order to get the attention of the exact kind of voter that leans to Trump, you need to run on a platform that is calling for bold changes for better equality, not plenty bold. The Atlantic, which I actually now have mixed feelings about. It kind of makes you wonder why we keep pushing moderates, huh? Despite them being losers with unexciting ideas. And this seems as good of a time as any to tell you about a honky named George McGovern, who ran against incumbent Richard Nixon in 1972 before being defeated by like a really embarrassing amount. Real bad. Creamed by Richard Nixon. Dick creamed. We already know the similarities between Nixon and Trump and the depressing popularity both men had despite being like obvious criminals. But what our best buds at the Atlantic have also pointed out, McGovern has an eerie resemblance to Bernard Sanders and his campaign. Both were very anti-war, both were extremely popular with the Hispanic vote, they relied on a grassroots movement with smaller donations, and both talked at length about taxing corporations and boosting the wages for the working class. Here's a direct quote from McGovern saying, "Democratic leadership will see to it that working men and women obtain a higher share of profits and that corporations pay a fairer share of taxes." A disgusting idea! Here's another quote where he calls Nixon out for bowing down to corporate interests and adding, "What can we do about insurance rates when he is beholden to huge insurance company magnates?" And also, here's a political cartoon saying that he has more plans than Aunt Sally has corsets, which is less related to Bernie specifically and more related to another candidate no longer in the race whose ideas line up really well with Bernie's, but also like, what the f***, man? Why are you... Stay away from your aunt's corsets, you jaunty creep. Whatever, you're probably dead by now. The point is that looking back at McGovern, it's clear that he was A, absolutely right, and B, extremely unpopular. And the fact that his then progressive ideas were rejected seemed to have spooked Democrats into perpetually resisting another progressive candidate. But as The Atlantic also points out in their comparison, it is not 1972 anymore, and it's been 50 years since then for income inequality and healthcare costs to explode, and people are downright sick of this malarkey. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get blue there with the M word, but I'm pretty worked up about the fear caused by the results of an election that happened just 8 years after black people were allowed civil rights. Anyway, the last big victory for Dems came with Obama, a man who ran on a progressive platform. And almost every moderate they've run before and after Obama has failed. Some cite Bill Clinton's third way politics as being the winning approach, without really mentioning that the election also had the most successful third-party run ever. So, gee whiz! I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. Maybe Biden, a guy with ties to the administration that Trump supporters hate, with a perceived deep state conspiracy around him that the Republicans are 100% going to dig up if he goes against Trump, the same way they pulled that Benghazi and email shit on Hillary, a man who fumbles over all of his words and thoughts and touches both men and women like a horny alien, and boldly enough represents the establishment that led people to elect Trump in the first place. Maybe he's a bad choice to run against Trump. Maybe that's an obvious and historically stupid idea. And it would be really frustrating to see him nominated, debate over who bad touches women the most. Spoiler alert, it's Trump. He raped his ex-wife. Then lose to Trump. Then watch Democrats completely ignore the lesson again. Because there's a very real chance of that thing I just said actually happening. People, please consider this. So that's the part where I'm angry, and will continue to be angry up until the primary is decided. But first, I'm gonna give everyone a little bit of hope. Not just because the edible is kicking in, but because I actually believe in this. Are you ready? Lean in. Everyone lean into their screens. Put your face on the screen. Really get that coronavirus up in there. The truth is, Trump is not that hard to defeat. He really isn't. Hillary, despite what you may think about her qualifications or ideas or ability to be president, wasn't a great candidate. There was that Comey letter right before the election. She still won the popular vote by 3 million votes. Incidentally, winning the popular vote but losing the election is something moderate Democrats are pretty good at. But the point is, Trump sucks, and everyone knows it. His average approval rating is 40%, way below previous presidential averages. His highest ever rating still didn't cross 50%, something every other president has done. Even the bad ones, you know the ones. He's a loser and uncharismatic, and he has no knees, and his brain is melting before our very eyes. And frequent polls, even from Fox News, show that people don't want him as the president. He stresses everyone out. No one likes him. He smells like leaky car batteries, probably. He's been kept in power because of the weird ghouls in Congress and nothing else. Yes, he has followers, and we absolutely shouldn't make the mistake of underestimating those people. But he's not invincible, at least not with a, half-decent political strategy. We'd have to really mess up again to give him a second term. And one big way we could really mess up is by not having a unified party by the general election, meaning that whichever candidate is nominated absolutely has to have the Democratic Party pushing that person. But since it's historically less likely for a moderate to win, that unity really should be around a candidate with bold, progressive ideas. From the candidate who consistently beats Trump in national polls, by the way. The one with ideas Democrats love, who can still get applause by a Fox News audience. This is why, compared to Joe Biden, it would be very nice if we could have Bernie as the actual nominee. Come on. Come the heck on, you guys. One of the biggest and most terrifying realities of Donald Trump's victory was the conditions in which it was birthed. In 2016, Americans were very unhappy with how the government was being run. We were equally bummed about the media, the majority feeling very little trust for networks and papers. There was a big dumb constant wars, that didn't solve anything. And so it's no surprise that this grifter Floam was able to wrap his racism in a tidy package of fake news and deep state accusations. Hillary very clearly represented the establishment of the status quo. The same establishment that promised progress, but delivered, that voted for that war no one liked. Of course people wouldn't go for that. So why do we think that they would go for Joe Biden, who represents all of those same things? Bernie has spent his career building the image of an outsider of that establishment, while still being able to get things done within it. For veterans, who support him more than any other politician. He combats with the media without calling factual reporting fake news, and while calling out Trump's weaponization of calling them the enemy of the people, and while having an actual plan to fix the problems in new media. Bernie, checks notes, didn't vote for bad war. His message appeals to that same frustration with the disappointing establishment. The difference being that instead of trying to kick Muslims and Mexicans out of the country while making a few hotel bucks on the side, he just wants to give us healthcare and college and elevate the lower class. He's the actual solution that Trump supporters thought they were voting for, an actual push toward change, whereas Joe Biden would just be going back to the conditions that led to Trump in the first place. Biden might alleviate the symptoms, but Bernie wants to actually cure the disease. I mean, not literally, because it would be very dumb to promise to literally cure it.
If I'm elected president, you're going to see the single most important thing that changes in America is we're going to cure cancer.
Jeezer, capeezer, Joe, there are 100 different kinds of cancer, and it mutates and takes a lot of research, so holy shit. People love to talk about Bernie's unrealistic goals. Joe Biden might call them pie in the sky, but this is okay. And I know his son died of cancer, and it's an issue he cares about, and I'm all for taking big swings and making lofty goals. But really? Imagine if Donald Trump said, "I promise to cure cancer if you elect me the president." Anyway, for f***'s sake, Bernie, you guys. It's Bernie who you want. But Bernie can only go so far without the overall support of Democrats. Just look at all of the sudden support Biden got from other candidates right before Super Tuesday, and how that helped him get a lead with last-minute voters. A microcosm for that is, of course, what happened in the South, and specifically the surge of African-American voters backing Biden. Some point to the trust Biden gained through his unwavering support of Obama, but also, as this Twitter thread from a writer for The Root points out, it probably has more to do with Southern African American communities having a great deal of loyalty to the Democratic Party as a whole. The reason he describes is that in these smaller communities, Dems are often the few people who have their back while also being embedded in that community. There are polls to back this up, showing that an overwhelming amount of black voters will back any Democrat over Trump in the 2020 election. And going back to the fact that while a great deal of Democrats are liberals, there are more that describe themselves as moderate or conservative. Well, that means most Democratic voters are just gonna go for the person who has the most support from the overall party, especially when that support can do sweet kick flips, man! Radical! F***ing I'm punk rock, man. I curse. Vote for Joe Biden. Biden has the establishment support that's very, very important to win a primary. But Bernie has the actual policies and record and ability to make coherent thoughts to win the general election. And while the overall goal is to win that election, unfortunately, Bernie is seen as less welcoming to moderates. And I think a lot of his supporters, spoiler alert, myself included, aren't all that thrilled about the idea of courting centrists or moderates in a country where the other side is dabbling with fascism and stonewalling democracy. But we need each other. The moderate Democratic establishment needs Bernie, and Bernie needs the moderate Democratic establishment. Look, I'm gonna hate this analogy as much as you, but if you want to understand how moderates see progressives, just look at Batman. Do it. Look at him. See, if Democrats are the superhero genre, then progressives are gritty Batman films. In 2008, they were gritty but accessible enough that we were all like, yeah, do it to me, Nolan. F*** me, Christopher Nolan. And then a bunch of years passed, and we got sort of spoiled by the gritty genre, and in 2012, we were like, still into it, but whined about how it wasn't good enough in some ways. And then in 2016, we were like, whoa, okay, dial it back. And now in 2020, we're like, oh, that could be really good, but I'm scared to trust again. I think that's how progressives are seen. Or not, I don't know. It's just neat the dates matched up, really, is the thing. The point is that the unification of progressive ideas and the Democratic establishment, like the combining of the broad appeal of superheroes with a grounded look at Batman, would result in a landslide win. Until, like, Aquaman gets elected or something. Again, not a perfect comparison. I don't know why I'm still committing to this. I'm pretty edible taker. I'm have take edible. So what's the path for Bernie, a candidate who is about to face another debate and elections in huge states like Ohio and Florida? Well, he's gonna have to pander a bit, kiss an orange or two, gotta court the South, African Americans, and older women voters. He's got to continue to heal animosity between his supporters and Warren supporters, because both groups have the exact same ideological goals. Also,
nominating someone who wants to restore the world before Donald Trump, when the status quo has been leaving more and more people behind for decades, is a big risk for our party and for our country.
But most importantly, he has to court moderates of the party, or at least people in the party who are put off by him, without selling out his agenda and principles. Like, perhaps he can keep leaning on the very true point that his ideas aren't that radical at all, and that the better brand for him is a New Deal Democrat rather than a scary socialist. Because that's really what he is, a New Deal Democrat. After all, a wise man once said that if Bernie Sanders never said he was a democratic socialist, based on what he's saying, people wouldn't be calling him a democratic socialist. And that man was Joe Biden in 2016. Smart, smart Joe.
You know, if Bernie Sanders never said he was a democratic socialist, based on what he's saying, people wouldn't be calling him a democratic socialist.
So, I don't know, maybe when it's your turn to vote for a nominee, you can put aside that worry about Bernie's electability, or if he's a real Democrat, or if he's likable enough to take on Trump, and just go with the candidate that actually seems like the best choice with the best ideas, and not just the safe one that always seems to lose. Maybe someone whose ideals have been antithetical to Trumpism for his entire career, and whose policies are antidotes to the rise of Trumpism. Go for the person that has the vision you like the most, and if enough people do that, and the person is Bernie Sanders, then the rest of the Democratic Party will fall in line. Blue no matter who, they say. And independents and moderates will pick up on that unity and energy and see it as a clear alternative to Trump, something they desperately want. And if he still loses the nomination, well, he's got to do what we all have to do and support Joe Biden. Will it feel good? Because nobody wanted Joe to run, not even Barack Obama. But even after everything I've just said, Biden does have a shot. Especially if we do our best to focus on the fact that he is, when he wants to be, pretty progressive enough and can be easily bullied into doing progressive things. You hear that, Jack? And in fact, he has a few strengths, like a lot of pull with moderate Republicans and people who just plain hate Donald Trump. So maybe, and probably, and hopefully, hate and reluctant resolve will be enough to win this. But it sure would be nice if there were some other reasons to fight. You know, to get other people excited, to energize a movement fighting for our and our planet's future. And that's why I'm with Batman. Roll credits. Nailed it. Except actually, Batman has a pretty fascist view of the world, and he's also a billionaire who uses his money not to improve the material conditions that lead people to crime, but rather to build himself personal tanks. So, Batman, and please stop voting for Joe Biden. Thank you. Swear to me! Or whatever, you know, from the movie. Hello, my beautiful babies. Thanks for watching that video to the very end, which you've done, and this is it. Be sure to like and subscribe and do the YouTube things that everybody knows that you do on YouTube. And check out our podcast, Even More News, and our patreon.com/somemorenews, and I don't know, other social media sites. Google the show. I don't know, look, whatever. Bye.